The sun was dipping behind the jagged mountains, painting the sky in streaks of blood orange and violet. When Daniel first saw her standing at the edge of the clearing, her hair was dark and tangled, falling over a face pale with exhaustion, and her clothes were soaked in mud and grime. There was something about the way she leaned against the tree, hesitant yet desperate, that made him pause mid-step. He had been riding all day through the rugged trails, chasing the faint trail of an escaped horse that belonged to one of the wealthiest ranches in the valley, and yet nothing in his long years had prepared him for the sight of someone who seemed both terrified and fragile, as if the world had already broken her. "Are you okay?" he called, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the forest. She didn't answer at first, only flinching as if his voice startled her. Her eyes darted around, nervous and haunted, and Daniel realized she had been watching him from the shadows, unsure whether to trust him. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible, his tone calm and gentle. "I won't hurt you." Her lips trembled, and finally she whispered, "I'm not clean." Her words were barely audible, yet heavy, with a weight that made Daniel's chest tighten. I can't be seen like this." Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. He didn't know what she meant exactly, but something told him she wasn't speaking about dirt or mud. There was a deeper shame, a trauma buried behind her trembling voice and the wildness in her eyes. Without thinking, he stepped closer. "You're safe now, just trust me, please." For a moment, she stared at him, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. She took a shuddering step back, and Daniel noticed the ragged blanket clutched to her chest. She hugged it like a shield, as if the world itself had tried to steal her away. I can't," she muttered, voice breaking. "I can't be." She paused, shivering violently, her gaze dropping to the ground. Daniel took another step slowly and knelt to meet her at eye level. "It's okay. Whatever you're hiding, it doesn't matter to me. You're not alone anymore." Something in his words seemed to reach her. Slowly, hesitantly, she allowed him to take the blanket from her trembling hands. The instant his fingers brushed against the rough fabric, she flinched and closed her eyes, bracing herself. Daniel held the blanket carefully, studying her expression, feeling the raw vulnerability radiating from her like heat from a fire. There was a pause, a heartbeat stretched thin in the cold air between them. And then, with a shaking sigh, she spoke again. I'm not clean," she repeated. "You don't understand. What's under this? It's horrible." Her voice was barely a whisper, yet each word cut through the quiet like a knife. Daniel's pulse quickened. There was urgency in her tone, a silent plea that made him want to promise her everything would be all right. "I want to understand," he said gently, taking another careful step closer. "I need to see it, though. You can't carry this alone." Her hands trembled as she slowly unclasped the corners of the blanket, and Daniel felt his stomach knot. There was fear in her eyes, a raw, helpless fear that made him tighten his jaw. Then she let the fabric drop, her chest heaving with the effort of standing exposed, her vulnerability laid bare to the world. And in that instant, Daniel's heart stopped. It wasn't just the sight of her body or the dirt that coated her skin. It was the stories written in scars, bruises, and wounds that she hadn't been able to hide. Every mark, every cut told a story of suffering and survival. He could barely breathe, his mind spinning with the weight of what she had endured and the sheer courage it took just to let him see. I've been running," she whispered, voice cracking. "Running from them. From everything. I didn't think anyone would ever care." Daniel took a careful step forward, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders once more. But this time, she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him slightly, like a scared animal seeking shelter from a storm. "You care," she said, almost incredulously. "You really care?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly, "and I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to run anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, the world outside the clearing seemed to vanish. The mountains, the dying sun, the forest, they all faded into the background as the weight of her trust and his promise hung between them. "You should rest," Daniel said softly, guiding her toward the small cabin he had set up at the edge of his property. You've been through too much. Let me help you." She hesitated, but eventually allowed him to lead her inside. The cabin was warm, lit by the soft glow of a lantern, and smelled faintly of wood smoke and dried herbs. He helped her to a chair, offering a bowl of warm water. She dipped her hands into it, shivering as the heat seeped into her chilled skin. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Daniel said. "Just breathe." "That's enough for now." For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to close her eyes, letting the tension in her body ease slightly. Daniel watched her, silently vowing to protect her, to help her heal from the horrors she had endured. And as he looked at her, he realized that this wasn't just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a bond neither of them could have anticipated, forged in pain, trust, and the fragile hope of something new. Hours passed, the fire crackling softly in the cabin as they sat in companionable silence. Then she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't even know your name." "Daniel," he said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "And I don't need to know everything about you right now. We'll take it one step at a time." She nodded, a small glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. And as the night deepened, Daniel knew that whatever it took, he would keep her safe. Because some people, some moments, demand everything from you. And this was one of those moments. And if you want to see what happens next, how Daniel helps her confront her past, face the people who hurt her, and uncover secrets that could change everything, make sure you subscribe now. You won't want to miss the shocking truth revealed in Chapter 2. The morning sunlight filtered through the cabin window, illuminating the small room with a soft golden hue. She was awake before Daniel, sitting quietly by the fire, her knees pulled to her chest as she stared into the flickering flames. The blanket was wrapped tightly around her, yet she seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of yesterday's revelations. Daniel watched her from across the room, unsure how to bridge the silence. Words felt inadequate, but he knew that staying silent wouldn't help either. "You don't have to face this alone," he said gently, moving closer. She flinched slightly at the sound of his voice, but didn't retreat. "Whatever happened? It's not your fault." Her eyes met his briefly, a mixture of fear and confusion clouding her gaze. "It's complicated," she murmured. They made sure I couldn't ever be clean, no matter what I did." Daniel knelt beside her, offering his hand. "Let me help you, please. You've carried this burden too long." Tears glistened in her eyes as she hesitated, then finally placed her hand in his. The warmth of his touch was grounding, a lifeline in the storm of her memories. Slowly she began to speak, not the full story. Not yet, but pieces of it. Shards of truth that painted a picture of fear, betrayal, and unimaginable pain. Daniel listened, never interrupting, never judging, simply holding space for her as the words tumbled out. Every revelation made his heart ache, yet he refused to look away. He refused to let her think she was invisible, worthless or unworthy of compassion. Hours passed and the story spilled out in fits and starts, sometimes broken by tears, sometimes by silence. And through it all, Daniel stayed. He offered water, wrapped her in blankets, and whispered words of reassurance. He reminded her of something crucial, that surviving this didn't make her unclean, it made her strong. Finally, as the sun began to sink behind the hills again, she fell silent, resting her head against his shoulder. Daniel felt the tension drain from her body, and in that moment, he realized that their connection was more than survival. It was trust, fragile and delicate yet undeniable. "You're brave," he whispered, "more than anyone I've ever known." She shook her head, a small, bitter smile tugging at her lips. "Brave or foolish?" "Brave," he insisted. "And you'll see it too one day." The following days were a delicate dance of healing. Daniel taught her to tend to the wounds that weren't just physical, the scars of fear, the bruises of trauma, and the invisible chains of guilt. They worked together in silence at times, the comfort of shared presence speaking louder than words. And slowly she began to trust him, letting him see not just the pain, but the glimmers of hope, strength, and resilience she had fought to protect. Then one evening, a knock at the cabin door shattered the fragile peace. Daniel's hand instinctively went to the pistol at his hip. but she held up a trembling hand. It might be them, she whispered, panic flashing in her eyes. Daniel didn't hesitate. He ushered her behind the table, heart hammering in his chest. Whoever had found them, they weren't expecting the resolve in his gaze. And as the door creaked open, the truth, harsh, raw, and unrelenting, was revealed. It wasn't just her past that was waiting outside. It was the choice she had to make. Continue hiding, running from the shadows, or stand and confront the darkness with someone who refused to let her fall. And in that moment, Daniel realized that love and courage weren't just about passion or comfort. They were about standing together when everything else tried to tear you apart. Her hand found his, tight and unyielding, and she whispered once more, "I'm not clean." Daniel squeezed back. "You are now," he said firmly. "And I'll make sure the world sees it too. Not the fear, not the pain, but the strength, the survival, the fire inside you." The tension was unbearable, every second stretching into eternity. Then slowly, deliberately, she lifted her head. The fear was still there, yes, but so was something new, defiance, resilience, and a quiet determination. And Daniel knew, with every fiber of his being, that this was just the beginning. If you want to witness the intense confrontation, shocking revelations, and the moment their lives change forever, make sure to subscribe to the channel now. This story isn't just about survival. It's about hope, courage, and the power of standing together when the world tries to break you.